Hey guys, as usual, please like and subscribe. If you like the content, check out my other reviews of the Andor series, as well as Book of Boba Fett, Mandalorian, many other Star Wars videos, as well as my sequel remake. And let's get into this. You might hear some pitter-patter. It is raining very heavily outside, but in the background, hopefully that doesn't bother you too much if you do hear it. So here we are, Andor, episode 12. We're back to Ferrix. This is pretty much primarily where this episode takes place. This is where Andor's from, his mom lives, all his friends live, and where the Empire has been interrogating his significant others, his friends and stuff, to figure out where he is and what he's doing. So it starts with resting bitchface arriving in a command shuttle. Again, really good production value, looks good. Andor's buddies are talking about the funeral and him possibly showing up. So predictably, all the characters are going to converge on Ferrix for this funeral, save one, Mon Mothma, which seems to have a completely separate arc that doesn't get resolved. So resting bitchface and Buddy are walking around disguised as locals. That scene it was completely useless. They didn't do anything. They didn't catch anybody doing anything. Why they even had that in there? There's a bunch of scenes in this episode, much like a lot of the episodes in this show, where they're trying to sort of be dramatic, but they really don't add anything to the story of the show. This was yet another one. So they're just walking around, and that's it. Nothing happens. So you see resting bitchface Imperial officer in local clothes. That's literally, there's no point. Then it shows a kid who appears to be making some sort of a bomb. Then we get a Mon Mothma scene where she's arguing with her husband about gambling on Coruscant. And Mothma is like, oh, well, if you're going to gamble, go to Canto Bight. Of course, they have to throw that in, right? Because sequel trilogy. And that because he's gambling on Coruscant, she's embarrassed. And he's arguing, well, no, who's telling you this? It's a lie. And blah. So they're just having this spat. And again, it's so dumb. And it was the writer's way of getting them to talk about money issues so that the driver of the limo turns on. She asks him to turn on the privacy. He does, and then he turns it off. So he's listening to them talk. So him being a gambler is like the writer's way of getting the driver to hear them talk about, sort of vaguely talk about her money situation because she's trying to support the rebellion or whatever. But it's really stupid because she's a senator. So why would the button to give her privacy in the back of her limo be in the control of the driver? With all the technology and everything else, why wouldn't it be in the back where she's sitting, right? Like it's just, these are things like you have to consider that, right? Like that makes no sense. That the driver would have control over whether he could hear them talk, and that there wouldn't be an indicator that, so he basically has full control. If he pushes the button to take away their privacy, there's no indicator in the back seat, no light turns on, nothing. It's just, she has no idea. So that was really dumb. This whole scene is okay. Mothma's having marital problems. She's having family problems. Her whole arc has been like a really bad soap opera. We all thought it would be about her devising plans with Bail Organa and forming the rebellion and all this stuff. And we find out, no, Mon Mothma was the money bag for Luthen. And she has family problems. Like, it's terrible. What a garbage arc, And Bail Organa isn't even in this show. And you remember the deleted scenes from Revenge of the Sith where they're all getting together and Padme's there and they're already, at that point, before Palpatine had fully taken over, we're already, discussing what they were going to do. But here we have, after that, she's not doing anything other than just having marital problems and trying to get money out of her bank account to support Luthen blowing up dams. It sucks. And then Andor is back on Ferrix. Of course he showed up. We have no idea how he got there, but he's there. And he goes to... Another thing about that, too, is he finds out his mom's dead, and the funeral's a few days later, and he gets all the way across the galaxy. This is something Disney's been doing since they took over, is they've really shrunk the galaxy. Remember in, I believe it's Rise of Skywalker, Rey goes to like 4 to 5 different planets in like a matter of a couple of days. Like, that's not Star Wars. We know from the expanse of space, and you do the math, and there's an article about this you can find online where they did the math, because people were asking how long did Luke train on Dagobah? And with the Falcon not having hyperdrive and having to go at its regular top speed, and based on the size of the galaxy, the distance between the planets, you can all look that up. You can find maps online about that Luke was training for, roughly 8 weeks. That's how long it took the Falcon to get all the way where it needed to go, which was Bespin, from where it was previously on Hoth, and then, getting stuck and being in the asteroid and all that other stuff. And you do the math, it's about 8 weeks. So this whole thing where these people are traveling these great lengths in a matter of just like an hour or two, it just seems to be a Disney thing. But anyways, he's there, Andor's there. He goes to Bix's shop. That's the girl who was getting interrogated, his friend or whatever. And he's told that she's basically, at the hotel, and that's where they're interrogating her. And then the Empire guys go over the funeral plans and, what they're going to be doing and what was allowed. And we finally get a stormtrooper shot of a stormtrooper. And then, of course, we get the scene of Mon Mothma's driver spilling the beans about, what he heard about her money and trying to get her money out or whatever to the Imperial officer who's on Coruscant. And then we find out the rebels all got killed as per Luthen not warning them, and Resting Bitch Face is pissed that there's no one alive to interrogate. If you remember from the previous episode, Luthen decides not to warn them that the Empire knows that they're about to make this strike on whatever it was, some power plant or something. And he had to do that because if he warned them and then they didn't go, then it would expose his plant, that guy that's an officer on Coruscant. And so you find out that, all those guys died. And the female, the girl, Resting Bitch Face, that's in charge of trying to find Andor, is mad because there's no one there to question. The Empire killed them all, blah, blah, blah. So then Andor then meets in secret with his buddy, who gives him the motivational speech his mom said to give him before she died. Okay, his mom loves him. And then it's just a shot of Crunchberry guy on the bus. I guess he's going to show up too. And then it's revealed that Luthen wants them to catch Andor so he can kill him. And the people from the dam bombing are in on it, and they want to kill him so he doesn't talk. So Luthen believes that the Empire's trying to get him so that they can get information out of him, which of course is what they're trying to do. So Luthen himself wants to murder Andor. Very lovely beginning to the rebellion. I really like that they have no moral compass, and they're basically just as bad, if not worse, than the Empire. At least the Empire tells you to your face what they're going to do to you. These guys are all like, Luthen's a total sleazebag behind people's back. Like, it's just an awful beginning to the rebellion. And people are like, well, it's more realistic. It isn't. The rebellion was always the moral juxtaposition to the Empire. Yes, they would retaliate, but they wouldn't just brazenly do what the rebellion is doing here. They're trying to be Game of Thrones, gray moral, amoral. There's no, it's all gray areas. It's just ever since Game of Thrones came out, every show is trying to do this now. And it's just not Star Wars. It's like Star Wars Theory says. It's not Star Wars. That's not Star Wars. So anyway, and then that Andor's a real jerk. Andor, Luthen's a real jerk, which I predicted, the first or second episode in my reviews that he was going to be a bad guy. And he calls Andor's mom's funeral festivities. That's nice, eh? Like, this is the guy leading the rebellion. I love it. I love how he's just a total jerk. That's great. It's just so dumb. And then the funeral starts early and the whole town shows up instead of the 40 that were allowed. So the Imperials start trying to block them. They put literally a police blockade, which anyways. And then this guy turns out to be a turncoat and is getting paid to rat out where Andor is. So again, everyone's just out for themselves, just like Game of Thrones. It sucks. And then Andor's mom appears in the funeral in the video with this motivational speech, and she says she wishes she fought against the Empire, and then, we need to stand up against them. And then one of the Imperials runs over to color the hologram with his coat, but fails totally. She keeps talking to get her final line in. It's like, bro, just throw your coat over the droid, it's not hard. And then she says, fight the Empire, and then everybody starts to go nuts, and then the townspeople start beating up the Imperials, and no one shoots them. Like, it makes no sense. Like, in the past, they didn't have to wait for a command. Like, if you started beating up an Imperial officer, the stormtroopers were shooting you. They didn't have to wait for one of the officers to tell them to shoot. It's just dumb. It's so slow moving. Like, they should already know, right? You're a stormtrooper, you already know. If somebody attacks one of your Imperial officers, you shoot them. There is no waiting for a command. The command is already made. If you see that, do it, right? Anyway, so everyone starts going nuts. It was basically like a police barricade, like in America, like the scene. They had the big shields and everything, and people are trying to get through. And it makes the Empire look weak again, and Disney Star Wars always does this. Like I said, in the past, you attack an officer, you're getting shot. You cause a riot, you're getting shot. So it's just dumb, and there's stormtroopers everywhere just standing there waiting to get the order to shoot. And it's like, it was just so stupid, and they're literally beating up Imperials, and nothing's happening to them. Other than, getting, it's like a fist fight. It's just so stupid. And then Andor finds Bix, and he's going to get her out of there. Then we cut back to the riot, where still no one's been shot. And then the kid making the bomb triggers it and throws it. It's basically just like a giant grenade and blows up an Imperial craft and a whole bunch of dudes and stuff. And just triggers a bunch of other grenades to go off that were in the Imperial shuttle. And after the blast, still no one gets shot until finally one of the Imperial officers says open fire. So then it is a mess, and then there's a whole bunch of people die at the funeral, and then Resting Bitchface takes a brick to the head, and she gets grabbed by a bunch of villagers, and then she's saved by Crunchberry Guy, which is fine, but it's weird because he pulls her into this area, where it's just the two of them. There's no mark on her head from the brick, like there's no cut, nothing, no bruise. That was missed. They missed that one. And she's shaking like a leaf, like she's never been through or seen any combat before. Like she's just like, and again, that just makes the Empire look really weak. And then she, looks deep into Crunchberry Guy's eyes, and I should thank you or whatever. But again, it just makes her look weak. Like I took her as an extremely. What I liked about her is she was just so tense and authoritative and, no muss, no fuss, all business. And then the moment she gets attacked, she's just shaking like a leaf, like she's just this pathetic weakling that can't handle it. It totally went against her character, and I was surprised by that. That was pretty dumb. So Cassian then he sneaks Bix out of there and gets her to the ship where his besties are. And then he goes back into the town or goes somewhere, and we don't know why Andor cares so much about Bix at this point. Like we know they're friends at the beginning of the show, but we took a major gamble to do what he did to go get her out of there and stuff like that. And you're kind of like, why is he so crazy for her? Like, I don't think she was a love interest. I mean, we just didn't get a lot of backstory. We got 15 scenes of Mon Mothma, talking about how she's going to get her money out, but we didn't get much in terms of why Bix and Andor are so close. Like, we know they're friends, but that's about where it ends. I mean, most of their talking was about, parts and Empire stuff, and there wasn't a lot of, depth in terms of their relationship, but whatever. That was kind of weird. And then we cut to Mothma introducing her daughter to this kid that this banker, whatever, loan shark guy said has to happen to make the deal to get her money out. And I'll talk more about that in a minute here. And then Andor somehow knew where Luthen's ship was, despite it literally being miles and miles and miles from town. Like, you get the impression from the shots that it's at least 50 miles from town. Somehow, and Luthen's on a speeder to get all the way there. And somehow Andor beats him to his ship and is waiting there for him. So he knows where it is, and he beats him there, despite having to go drop off Bix. And Luthen leaves before we see him drop off Bix, and he's on a speeder. So how does that work? Doesn't make any sense. And it reminds me of, and they think we won't notice that, like, as the audience. Oh, they're too dumb to know. It's like, no, how did he get there, man? That doesn't make any sense. And we don't see, maybe if you had a shot of Andor, stealing a speeder or something, you could kind of come to grips with it, but this doesn't make any sense. Andor has nothing. He's on foot. We don't even know how he got to the planet, let alone how he got to Luthen's ship that quickly. And it reminds me of, in the sequels, when Kylo beats Rey and Finn to the rendezvous point after being shot, people say, he's wounded, that's why Rey beat him. Well, how did he get there so fast then? If he can hardly walk, how did he get there so fast? How did he beat them to the rendezvous point? And they were running, right? It's just the same nonsense, and there's no explanation. And then Andor leaves his gun out and tells Luthen to kill him. Luthen's like, I can't. He's like, you came to kill me, didn't you? And Luthen's like, well, basically, yeah. And then he's like, okay, we'll do it. And then the episode ends. That's it. There's zero closure or finish to the scene. Like, there's nothing wrong with leaving questions. Of course, you want to leave questions for the next season. But you don't end the season mid-scene. You finish the scene. So maybe you don't have that scene then. Maybe you just have Luthen leave or whatever. Like, why would you end the season mid-scene? And we saw Game of Thrones do stuff sort of like this too. Not this brazen, but kind of like this. And this is what Andor is. The writers of Andor literally are trying to write Game of Thrones. They've got 14-year-olds coupling up. They've got all types of long drawn-out dialogue that's needless. I mean, at least in Game of Thrones, it was interesting at times with Tyrion and stuff like that. But this is the new thing now. Game of Thrones is really popular. And so they said, let's make a Game of Thrones Star Wars show. And it's just, you don't end it mid-season. It's so dumb. I honestly don't even want to watch the show in the next season now because they did this. Like, you didn't end the scene and then end the show, right? And again, leave questions, but don't end it mid-scene. It's just so silly. Anyway, and Luthen had the gun, and he could have shot him, and then that was it. So anyway, and then, when I'm thinking about the show overall, so you had 12 episodes, should have had 5 or 6. Way too drawn out, way too many Mothma scenes. Mothma was completely separated, and it was dumb. You have a very non-moral, gray rebellion, which I don't like at all. It's not Star Wars, like Star Wars Theory said. I mentioned that earlier. And then, the expectations we had for the rebellion, like I said, we expected Mothma and Bail, and we expected all this organization, and we didn't get any of that. We got this ruthless guy named Luthen, who's basically like an anti-hero, but really he's a bad guy, really, and he's just doing these little jobs, these little blow up the dam, blow up the power station jobs. You didn't get the sense that it was very well organized. And it wasn't, because of him and his poor organization and poor organizing, a lot of people died. So he's a really crappy leader, as far as I'm concerned. And so why everybody falls in line with this guy, like if I was Saw, I would have just shot him. Like, this guy puts a gun to my head, I'm shooting him. You're dead, buddy. You're an idiot. But nobody does that. Everyone just follows along with this disorganized guy who's very ruthless and kills everybody. This is not what any of us expected the rebellion to start off with. Like, and again, it's very Game of Thronesy. And then as far as Mothma goes, like what our expectations was, again, we expected all this organization. She was going to be such a pivotal, major piece of the early rebellion. She really isn't. She's just the money bags. And in the end, we know that she's not a senator and she's leading the rebellion anyway. So why wouldn't she have just left Coruscant, never came back, never showed up at the Senate again? She knows being a senator isn't giving her any power at all, because she's getting booed in the Senate. No one cares what she has to say. They're all giving up power to the Emperor anyway. So when it came to the whole mother-daughter thing, giving up her daughter, so essentially she's saying she just really needs her money, so she's going to give up her daughter. Why wouldn't she just walk away from everything? Like, I don't get this. It doesn't make any sense. Is the money that important to give up your daughter? Like, why? Because Luthen said he needs money? This ruthless killer guy says he needs money? Like, she looks really stupid in this show. Like, she's very unaware. She's going along with what everybody else is telling her to do. She's full of fear. She's not organized. She's totally dependent on everybody else. Just a weak character, not at all what I expected from the person who eventually leads the rebellion and the attack on the Death Star. It just doesn't make any sense. It's very, very silly. And ultimately, she doesn't accomplish anything. She still hasn't gotten her money. She's basically just created massive family problems, and she's going to let her family get destroyed. Like, it's like, way to go. And again, why did you go through all of this? Because this Luthen guy, because you had 2 conversations with this Luthen guy about creating problems for the Empire. I thought she was a strong woman, a woman with conviction, but it turns out she's just a weak sauce loser. And that's really sad that's who ends up running the rebellion, right? Like, in this show, it's terrible. And then in the credits, they show a bunch of robots building the laser for the Death Star. They screw up because the saucer that the laser shoots out of was already half built, but then in Andor, it's still being built and it gets installed after. So between Rogue One and Andor, nobody watched Revenge of the Sith. And you can watch my Rogue One problem video as well, where there's a huge problem because the Death Star was already designed. They didn't need some other guy to come in and finish it off. It was already designed in the Clone Wars, and it had already been designed, according to Wikipedia, for like 500 years. So why did they even do the whole Rogue One story with the dad and he put the weakness in it and all this crap? Like, it didn't make any sense anyway. But so they aren't watching Revenge of the Sith, and it's just for the visual. And this is what they do. These writers, they did it with the sequel trilogy. They still do it. And they did it with Obi-Wan, where we have to have a visual of Vader with his mask cut in half. So we'll revolve an entire story around getting that visual. We have to have the visual of the Death Star, pieces, such a cool shot. So we'll do that, but we'll completely contradict what we saw in Rogue One, and then that also contradicts what we saw in Revenge of the Sith. So they both do. It's so terrible. It's like they don't even watch Star Wars, and they're writing Star Wars. And then just to finish off here, guys, Andor is a killer. Luthen is a killer. Mothma is an inept fool. Nobody has any morals. They're painting the rebellion as no better than the Empire with their tactics, blurring the line, the moral compass line. And ultimately, they're trying to be Game of Thrones. It's a terrible retcon of what the rebellion was, what their mission statement would have been, all of that stuff. It's cool. The visuals are cool. As a basic non-Star Wars drama, it's kind of a cool show. But the fact that it's Star Wars and about the early rebellion, it's actually a terrible, terrible show. It paints the rebellion in a terrible brush. It is anti-George Lucas's Rebellion. It's just a really bad show. And all it is just Game of Thrones, Star Wars, and Star Wars isn't Game of Thrones. Game of Thrones is Game of Thrones, Star Wars is Star Wars. They really ended this off really badly after episode 10 had a lot of potential. Let me know in the comment section what you guys think. This is not Star Wars, but thanks for watching and have a good day.